Murder attempt survivors. What happened? While transferring work locations, I was staying with a cousin of mine at the new location. Her psychotic, alcoholic, drug-addled, vicious ex-boyfriend, whom she had just kicked out of her house, was stalking her. He saw me move in, assumed I was the new boyfriend, and lay in wait for me outside her house one night, where he jumped me from behind and slit my throat. Despite losing massive amounts of blood, I didn't die. I didn't even feel that bad. So while he was trying to break into her house, presumably to kill her too, I grabbed a baseball bat from the trunk of my car and beat him until I passed out. When I woke up I wasn't thinking all that clearly, so I went inside, cleaned myself up and drove to the hospital. My cousin wasn't even home at the time. She had gone into the city with her mother for the weekend to see a show and go shopping. My attacker and I ended up in the same ICU. I had rendered him a quadriplegic. There was a great deal of civil and criminal legal balls to deal with, but in the end I was cleared of any wrongdoing, and he was put on probation for 10 years, as he was no longer able to so much as brush his own teeth. His lawyer, provided by his wealthy family, convinced the judge that he was no longer a threat to anyone and the state would be spared the burden of providing him the round-the-clock care he needed if he wasn't sent to prison. I was left in massive debt which took me many years to pay off. I did sue him for the injuries I sustained, but despite being a trust fund baby from a wealthy family, he himself was indigent. He'd blown his trust fund on drugs, booze and gambling, and had nothing. His family provided him with everything, including his lawyer. He died about the same time his probation ended. Man really said call an ambulance, but not for me. Also sorry this ever happened and props for beating the living crap out of him. He pointed the gun at my face, pulled the trigger and it didn't fire. I could have beaten Usain Bolt in the next 10 seconds. Glad you're still around to tell the tale. I have a good friend with a similar story. He thinks the gun jammed or the safety was still on or something. He likes to say you've never seen a fat boy move so fast after that. My older sister was incredibly abusive towards my family, but especially me. I'm away now, so no worries. When I was 14, our dad and her were having a super petty argument that just exploded into her trying to kill him while he tried to defend himself without hurting her. She tried to stab him 3 times over but thankfully failed as my dad disarmed her. I could only watch this whole thing happen, completely frozen. She then turned to me and let out a horrible scream that I will always remember. She grabbed a knife off the floor and lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. She swung the knife towards my eye while screaming something along the lines of "I'm taking your eye." She kept pushing the knife towards it, but I managed to put my hands over hers and pull it off. My dad also tried to pull her off, but when she got like this, she had this insane primal strength and could barely be moved. The knife then cut underneath my eye, nearly hitting the eyeball. As usual with these events, nothing came of this and my mum and sister still gaslight me and say that I had some glandular issue and that's how I got a scar. Holy crap, your mother and sister gaslighting you make me angrier than reading the initial attempted stabbing WTFFF. When I was 7 years old I made friends with a neighbor girl and we would frequently have play dates. She had an older brother, around 12-13, that would babysit us during these hangouts. One day my parents let me go over to their place on my own, as their house was in spitting distance of ours, but the brother was the only one home. He assured me that his sister would be home soon, so he lured me out to the backyard. For background, the house was completely fenced in and the backyard had a tree line surrounding it. He told me to wait by the swings, which I did, and all of a sudden he charged at me with a sledgehammer. I fell on my back in fear and his swing landed between my legs into the ground. I ran as fast as I could back to my house. My parents, to this day, say it was just horseplay, but I will never forget the look in his eyes after he missed his swing. I was attacked in a friend's house by an ex-husband. He slit her throat and slashed my face with a box cutter before hitting me over the head with a plate, knocking me out temporarily. He then lit the place on fire with us in it. I managed to wake up and drag her outside and a neighbor called the police ambulance. They caught him 2 days later trying to commit suicide in a Ramada Inn. We both lived through it, and now he is serving a life sentence. We both lived through it, and now he is serving a life sentence. I'm happy to hear this. Much love for you. Stay safe. It happened during my first year in uni. I lived with 3 roommates at my dorm. A few months into the first semester, one of my roommates had a mental breakdown and attempted to strangle me while I was asleep. I woke up to his hands around my throat, his knee on my chest and a deranged look on his face. I tried pushing him off me, clawed at his face etc, but to no avail. My eyes started to dim, my hands felt leaden. I was sure I was going to die. Fortunately my other roommate wasn't asleep. He was laying under the covers browsing on his phone. The sounds from our struggle caught his attention and after seeing what was happening, he pushed the attacker off me and knocked him to the ground. He then woke the other roommate and together they restrained the attacker on his bed and called the university police. The police arrived around 15 minutes later and after we told them what happened, they called the actual cops. My roommate was arrested and taken to the police station. There he had another breakdown and bit one of the cops. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility after that. He was also expelled from the university. Something similar happened to one of my old uni roommates. She got moved to our room after her suitemate had a breakdown and attacked her with a hot pan. She luckily grabbed a knife and backed into her own bedroom before locking the door and calling campus police. It was an insane story but heard it both from her and our before she moved in. I was shot in 2012 while delivering pizza. I was in air traffic controller school at the time. I ended up mostly okay, but disqualified from my career because I had trauma-induced seizures as a result. Of the 3 attackers, 1 died in a motorcycle crash before trial and the other 2 were out of prison by 2016. Very sorry to hear that. Not my story, but my cousin's. She was married to this crazy man. I won't go into detail about the ways he was awful, but he was insane. Also, before he married my cousin, he had another family who all died in a house fire. All 4 of his children and his previous wife. We all felt bad for him for suffering such a tragic loss, because we didn't know what he was like behind the scenes at home. We never suspected anything off about that, just thought it was a tragedy. Well, finally my cousin decided to leave him. She took her 2 kids and moved away. She had to leave abruptly, so she was missing a lot of important things. Social security cards, birth certificates, stuff like that. One day, after things cooled down some between her and her ex, she arranged for her to go over to their old house and gather the rest of their things. He asked that she bring the kids, because he missed them. Luckily, she decided to let them stay at their friend's house instead. She went over to the house, and he was absolutely enraged that she didn't bring the kids. He shot my cousin 4 times and then shot himself in the head. He was planning to do a murder-suicide with the whole family. That's why he wanted the kids there. My cousin was shot twice in the neck, in the face, and in the arm. Somehow, none of the bullets struck any major arteries or anything. She was able to make it next door to her neighbor's house and get help. She survived a murder-suicide attempt, and her ex didn't. That whole thing really makes me look at that house fire tragedy in a different light. Not me, but a girl I went to school with. Her deranged uncle broke into her house dressed as a FedEx driver while her parents were running errands. Mom and dad came home, tried to wrestle the gun from him before she and the husband were shot and killed. He then made all 5 kids lay on the floor as he shot them one by one. The bullet intended for my friend grazed her hand and head and she played dead. She was the only survivor. She came back to school the next year, but people were horrible. There were nasty rumors about how she made it up, faked it, how it was her fault, etc. She's now engaged and in college. One of the strongest people I know, and such a sweetheart. People are horrible. I wasn't the intended target but I could have died. I worked at small family-owned bicycle shop. My boss, the father of the family, was a pretty nice guy, as far as I knew him. Anyway, one day, I was rearranging displays and my boss's wife and kids were there. A pretty normal day until somebody slammed the shop door open and emptied a full pistol clip into the shop, specifically at my boss. I got on my stomach as soon as I knew what was happening and waited until I heard the guy running away. My boss was shot a couple times in the head and chest and was obviously dead on the spot. His daughter got hit in the upper arm and the wife broke her arm diving to the floor. I was kidnapped after being raped a few days prior. I'd threatened that I was going to the police and he flipped, abducting me and threatening murder-suicide. He drove more and more remote and I was tied up and helpless. He couldn't decide which way to kill me and I manipulated the frick out of his uncertainty. He had his whole hand around my throat at one point and I threw all pride and shame to the wind by telling him how much I loved him. He eventually let me go after I brought him to the hospital and promised to help him. Really felt like a coward after that. All I could think of was my kids and how I didn't want us to leave each other, but the fact I lied and told someone I loved them to get out of being murdered really freaking comes between me and my sleep at times. Doing whatever you need to escape is the right thing. Good job. I'm sorry you had to suffer through something so awful. Strangulation by a step-parent. When my strength and eyesight faded and I felt about to lose consciousness for the last time, they let up just a hair. Next thing I knew, I was in another room with a locked door between us. Was primal crap. No idea how escaped. We'll never know if they experienced a brief moment of clarity that they could actually go to jail, lose their cash cow in the form of my bio parent, or if they thought the deed was done. They tried to break the door down and I considered jumping out the window, but I knew they would catch me before I reached the neighbor's house and they wouldn't fail a second time. Might even add the neighbors. And if I left, it'd be my bio parent for sure. The perfect bruises of their hands on my neck lasted weeks. Wore a scarf. They're still together. Frick this person and frick your parent for allowing this to happen. Holy crap. My twin sister and grandpa were killed during a home invasion. I should have been there, but I left to go give a drinking friend a ride home. When I came back, there were police and tape and ambulances. Home invasion gone wrong. They were both killed execution style. She was 30. Love you GPA Felix. And the other half of my soul is already in the after with Amelia. I'm so sorry for your losses. Not sure if this counts, but had this neighbor kid I used to play with. A complete psycho. I was 4/5. He was a year or two older than me. One day he convinced me to walk well beyond the distance that my parents allowed me without an adult. Wanted to show me something, he said. We arrived at a small lake. He pointed at the water and said, look, there's tadpoles in there. Let's catch some. We don't have a net. You'll have to jump in and catch them with your hands. I told him I couldn't swim. He insisted. He told me he'd pull me up if I was drowning. I refused. He kept trying to convince me but eventually gave up. Said I was a coward. A friend of my mom saw us on our way back, and my mom wasn't very happy about the situation when she found out. 11 years later, I transferred schools and ended up in the same class as him. I figured my childhood memory of him was exaggerated. We talked about childhood memories. He told me how one of our neighbors, who was a cop, had screamed at him for no reason because he was playing with a cat. Remember this? I told him it was nice to see him have so many friends. He responded, friends? They're not my friends. Freaking kids. I only let them think I'm their friend, smiling the whole time. Figured he was joking. I later told my mom about having met him. She went quiet. I told her that he seemed to have turned out alright. Nothing more said. Couple of weeks later, I brought it up again. She said, as a mother, I'll never be able to trust that boy, and you shouldn't either. She went on to tell me how I was unable to sleep and cried a lot at night when I was a young kid. Reason being that he had told me he was planning to burn down our house and murder me and my family in our sleep. And about our neighbor screaming at him. Turns out he was actually caught torturing the poor cat. After that I avoided him. Thinking back, his behavior was off even as a young adult. He was clearly manipulative and lacked empathy. Final thoughts. Pretty sure he wanted to drown me that day and wanted it to seem like an accident. This gave me goosebumps. Holy buckets. Glad you're alive to tell the tale. My drunk ex-husband came home in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. He was pissed off at me for some unknown reason and got on top of me in bed and strangled me to the point where he thought he had killed me. When I came to, he was sitting on the side of the bed crying. He had choked me so badly that I had broken blood vessels in my eyes. I never spent another night under the same roof as him and we divorced soon after. I'm glad you made it out of there. There was a girl in the village of my parents' vacation home who was known to have mental health issues. My family never judged her for it. Both my parents are teachers and used to deal with slow students that say some wicked things every now and then. When I was 2, my parents went on vacation and so did that girl's family. That girl was 12. Both families were having lunch together and my parents left the girl to play with me. When my sister, 9 at the time, went to look for me, I was being drowned in a water tank by said girl, who was just looking at my sister smiling and saying some weird things. My sister screamed and my parents and the girl's family went to the rescue in time to save me. I have no memory of this, so all I know is the story my family told me a few times. I haven't actually met this girl yet, neither have I ever talked to her family. Both families still go on vacation to the same village at the same time, but my parents cut ties with them. I feel like I'm going to watch how my children play with others more closely moving forward. They are little dudes, and so vulnerable. I'm almost sure she'd have played it off as an accident if she wasn't interrupted. And I'm so freaking glad you have an older sister. A while back I was at my friend's house when a guy came in through a balcony glass door. He had climbed up to 2-story balcony and proceeded to start yelling at her things like who is the moth earth can now be, and I stood up to protect her. It was dark and I couldn't see the knife in his hands, which he then stabbed me in the face with. Never met the guy or even knew his name. After I got out of hospital and started to try and figure out what was that all about, our mutual friend told me that he had asked the perk the same question and his answer was I was going to murder her but didn't know Sebler was there also. I'm 23 and that was my second time getting stabbed and altogether I have 5 stabbing scars. WTF equals welcome to Finland. I didn't know Finland was so stabby. Growing up, one of my older cousins was a legit sociopath. He was on meds for oppositional defiant disorder. Some of the pettier things he did included blowing up caterpillars and frogs with firecrackers, keeping a stockpile of knives under his bed, stealing bikes, things of that nature. Sucker even stole my Egyptian Mew card. One day, when I was around 9-10 and he was 12-13, we were playing in his backyard with several other kids. For some reason he took an axe and threw it at me as hard as he could. It went right past my head and lodged in the tree behind me. No doubt in my mind he was aiming for my head and missed. To this day I still don't know why he did it. I've kept my distance from him ever since. He wasn't mad at me or anything. We were just playing. Lately I haven't heard much about him besides that a mutual friend stopped talking to him because he got them addicted to coke. And he posts a lot of homophobic crap on social media. Not me but my sister. She was working in retail sales at a large popular mall in a large city a few years ago. One day as she arrived at the mall for work, she stopped to use the restroom. The ones general mall goers would use. After using the restroom, she went to wash her hands when she noticed in the mirror that a man was standing behind her. She made eye contact with him and apparently gave him a nod of acknowledgement. The man was apparently holding a garbage bag he had gotten out of the roost room trash can and had fashioned it like a rope. He proceeded to approach my sister and wrap it around her neck, choking her and then slamming her on the ground. She doesn't remember much, but the security camera showed the man literally choke her unconscious and then stomped on her head repeatedly. The man fled and she was found by another mall goer. She was covered in blood and her face badly disfigured. She broke her jaw and lost several teeth. Long-term brain damage is still not known. He tried to kill her. He was a complete stranger but the police think it was a gang initiation type of thing. The guy is now in jail for a very long time, and my sister has very severe PTSD from it. My mom's first husband was shot to death while he was in his car. He was a 71-year-old security guard. He was gunned down by 2 20-year-olds as a gang initiation ritual. 2 weeks ago they both got sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. My father tried to choke me to death. I fought him off and beat the crap out of him. It was the last time he put hands on me, but the other abuse kept going. He died 12 years ago from cancer. I struggled with PTSD and alcoholism until he died. I got sober and haven't had a drink since he died. I see a therapist and take medication. I go to AA and now work with addicts and abused people. I have also chosen not to have children. I have no desire to ruin a human and am too afraid I would if I had a kid. My mother, who was also an abuser, died 3 years ago from a heat attack. What did I do? I survived them. I never gave in. I grew and healed and now I help other survivors. Thank you for letting me share my experience. If you are abused or have survived attempted murder, it doesn't have to rule your life. You are not alone. You can heal too. Thanks for the inspiration. Kinda stranger. Oh boy, I just woke up, but this is finally a Reddit question I have an answer to. I was waiting at the bus stop. It was only me and an older woman waiting there. I had received a phone call from my partner a few moments earlier about how there had been a stabbing and that I should stay safe. A few minutes after that call, a man crossed the road, walked up to me and hit me over the head with a wooden fence post. I blacked out, not sure how long it was for, but I came to on the floor with blood spilling out from my head. It's foggy. I don't remember his face, but I know I looked up, said, "What the frick?" over and over. I somehow managed to stand up and run. I don't think he expected me to get up and was put off guard. I know now that around 30 minutes before hitting me, this man had stabbed and killed a 24-year-old man. I often think about how if I hadn't woken up in that moment, I most likely would have been killed. This guy had done it before. He had the capacity to. I ran across the road, almost getting hit by a car, and made it to a pharmacy where amazing staff took care of me while we waited for an ambulance. I apologized many times for getting so much blood on their floor. I remember finding my wallet and phone in my pockets. Realizing that this guy did what he did solely to hurt me made me break into tears. I made it to hospital, gave a 12-page statement to the police. They took my clothes as evidence. My favorite Baylor Club shirt, which was covered in my blood. I'm still mad I wore it that day. I got 7 stitches in my head. I passed out when getting them. My family smuggled in some McDonald's and I requested some earphones because I knew I wouldn't sleep that night. I think I listened to like 5 Giant Bomb podcasts that night. Sorry, this is disjointed. These are just the things I remember. It was a long recovery. Lots of hard moments. It really shakes your trust in strangers when one tries to kill you unprovoked. 2 years after, there was a trial where they sent him to a mental prison. It was a long week. While there, I met the mother of the man he had killed. She cried throughout every day. When I met her, I completely froze. I couldn't say anything. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, even though I did nothing. When I was a kid, my father got into a relationship with a rather strange, but still kind woman. She had a son, who was only a couple years older than me. At the time, I didn't think anything of their relationship, but looking back at it, it was very abusive. They got into fights often, most of them turning physical. Even when both me and my father were present, the kid would always try to push me over and hit me, but I would never say anything to my father because I didn't want to ruin his relationship. Now here's where my memory gets hazy, so take the details with a grain of salt. My father and his then girlfriend were having a conversation, while I and her son were a few meters away from them. He once again tried to hit me, at which I sat on top of him to prevent that. I was a really fat kid and he was very skinny, so despite the age difference, this somehow worked. I told him I would get up if he left me alone, and since he promised to do so, I just sat beside him. He proceeded to get on top of me and strangle me. I remember trying to cry out for help and reaching out to my father, but not being able to make a single sound and feeling like I was being pulled away from him. I'm pretty sure I passed out after that, or was at least very close, because after that I only remember that my father's girlfriend and her son were now gone. I never saw them again, though the last I heard of them was years later, after my dad received an anti-wedding invitation from her. From what my dad told me, she was angry at her son, but was even more pissed at my dad for ending the relationship. I'm pretty sure he didn't really intend to actually murder me, but then again, what is the intention of trying to strangle a 7-8-year-old kid? All in all, this was surprisingly less traumatizing than you think it would be. TLDR. Father's ex-girlfriend's son tried to strangle me. Your dad is a real one for ending the relationship right then and there. My fiance at the time was annoyed with what I had worn on a night out. The evening at the club was normal enough until it got later in the evening and he was annoyed I was talking to my friends. He grabbed me by the throat and had me literally off the ground. My friends managed to get him off me, so he took my bag with my keys, phone, wallet etc. and left me at the club. I had nowhere else to go, so had to home. When I got in, he started to rape me, then was strangling me at the same time. I passed out and don't really know what happened after then. When I came to, I was covered in scratches and bruises and couldn't turn my neck. My throat was sore for ages, so I could barely speak. I ran into a friend the next morning and broke down. Found a new place and moved out as quickly as I could. Didn't tell him where I was going and left the uni that we were both at. It wasn't the only time he tried to kill me, but it was the one that was the wake up call. Not me, but my mom. A man entered her house just before lunchtime and stabbed her and her maid multiple times. He also kept punching both of them while stabbing them. Eventually he got tired and left. My mom played dead. Then when she was sure that they were alone, she checked on the maid to see if she was still alive. Both of them survived the attack, but the police never found the guy. The thing is, my mom knows the guy. See, she owns a flower shop and had 2 people working for her. One of them is this nice gay guy, and that guy had a boyfriend. It was the boyfriend who attacked my mom, and my mom told me that he was high and was looking for money. It seemed like his boyfriend didn't want to give him money that day, so he decided to attack his BF's employer instead. Since then, my vibrant, outgoing mom became reclusive and she developed various health conditions. She's also always in a state of pain, which led her to become dependent on pain meds. The meds ruined her kidneys and liver, and now she's undergoing dialysis for it. I am so sorry. My stepfather decided he'd had enough one night and tried to murder my family. My brother and I survived. My mother did not. To fill in some blanks, I don't think there was any warning about what was going to happen. The night it happened, he shot my mother, came upstairs, shot me, shot at my brother, and then shot himself. He survived until he reached the hospital, but he didn't make it despite their attempts. So no, he wasn't punished or locked up. I guess I'm glad, or I might have always been looking over my shoulder in case he got released. Yes, it was on the news, which was horrible because everyone at my school knew all about it. When I was just trying to live with some kind of normalcy, it was out there for all to know. I just wanted to be treated the same so I could pretend like things were the same. I found out a few details years later, and just when I thought I had kind of accepted it all, it turns out my mum was getting ready to leave him. Not only might she have been spared what happened to her, but she wanted to get back together with my dad. So that's pretty much the story. I have so many questions. I'll just say I'm very sorry for your loss. There was this guy who I used to chat with at the bar. He was a little weird, but seemed lonely, so I would talk to him because I felt a little sorry for him. This went on for months and eventually he asked me out, and as tactfully as I could I said no, I wasn't interested in seeing anyone now, and I thought he was okay with it. He'd do and say the occasional inappropriate thing that made me feel uneasy, but not bad enough to be rude or make him feel alone, and we both liked horses. So that's pretty much what we talked about. I thought he was fine with this and things went on as before. But then he came in with a friend from work and I was sitting with them, and the friend was extremely obnoxious and loudly making all these rape and GHB jokes. Like he just wouldn't stop even after I said he was making me feel uncomfortable. He said in a condescending tone, "You don't really think we are going to rape you, do you?" And I felt stupid and ashamed and said no, but they kept going on, and finally I said I was going to the washroom and please get the jokes out of your system while I'm gone or I'll leave. That was very stupid and it gave them time to dose my drink. Now it doesn't make you pass out like many assume, but it kind of makes you a suggestible zombie, but also get drunk a lot faster, or enhances the effects of the alcohol. Whatever. Anyway, he told my other friends I wasn't well and he's going to take me home and I'll be safe, and after that I don't remember anything till being in his room and the assault happening. It was surreal. Like I was floating through the ceiling watching what was happening from above and trying to will my body to get up, run, get up, run, get up, run. But it was like a marionette with the strings cut. Then he pushed my shoulder really hard and I heard a low snap and I rushed back into my body and I had the sensation of dying, of being drowned in blackness. Much later I woke up and it was day as there was light coming around the curtains and I managed to find my things and get out, but I have PTSD from it to this day and I need a cane to walk. Also, the police did nothing, so I also have PTSD from the patronizing way I was treated by the police after this. When I was living overseas, a man broke into my apartment. He came in through the window of my studio apartment at about 5:30 in the morning. Thankfully, I was awake. He started to go attack me and tried to strangle me. I was able to fight him off by getting my feet up onto his chest and pushing with all my strength. This happened a few times. The only thing he would say was "You die, you die." He was slender and I don't think he was very prepared, and I don't think he expected me to fight back. Partway through this, when I realized that he wasn't giving up, is when I really started to get scared and think to myself that I needed a plan and to get out of there. My friend lived next door, so I decided I was going to make a run for it. Once I stood up, he ran back out the window. I grabbed my glasses and my phone and ran to my friend's apartment. Thankfully she was awake. I told her what happened and she was like, "You have to call the police by this time." Shock was starting to set in and for some reason, my brain was telling me, I am okay. So nothing happened. She kept reiterating that I needed to call the police. I decided to call one of my co-workers who spoke English really well and ask her. This co-worker was horrified at what happened and immediately said that she was going to call the police for me and call me back. Once the police arrived, she acted as the translator to tell them what happened. I have a schizophrenic brother who started an argument when late teens over my dad giving me his old iPhone. He decided a rational tactic was to chase me with a chainsaw then try to chainsaw my car. Police came but not before he broke my mother's ribs. I've had an intervention order against him since and don't consider him family. Solo hiking. Ran into two men who acted nice at first, then started following me on my trail. Things escalated. They beat me up pretty bad while trying to rape me. I fought like fury. I'm fit and used to do combat sports, so I was able to do quite a bit of damage right back. I think when they realized they themselves were taking too many hits, they cut their losses and fled. I have no doubt they would have killed me as well as raped me if I hadn't made it such an unholy battle for them to get me down. I was a mess, and still needed to hike back to civilization after that. I could write a freaking book about that return hike. Eventually I made it out. I don't talk about it, like ever. I guess Reddit is as good a spot as any to put it down. I fought like fury. Frick yeah. I'm very sorry this happened to you. This quote is inspirational AF. I have a daughter I'm gradually teaching self-defense to as she gets older. I'm going to borrow this line and tell her this story. I'm glad you made those bastards suffer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.